In 1991, the book Phenethylamines I Have Known and Loved was published by Alexander or Sasha Shulgin and his wife Anne. This book was a complete breakdown of 179 different compounds that these two discovered themselves on the farm in Lafayette, California. In this book, the two would call out 6 compounds which they deemed to be the most important psychedelics and call them the magical half dozen. These are those compounds. The first is a very well-known compound called mescaline, which is present in nature via the San Pedro and peyote cacti, as well as several others. Mescaline has been in use by the native peoples of the United States and Mexico for ceremonial and religious purposes for at least the last 5,700 years, but we can infer that they've probably been using it for longer than that. Sasha lists mescaline under TMA2 for trimethoxyamphetamine, and he describes its effects as such. Very slow coming on. Didn't feel it for an hour, but then at a full 3+ in another hour. Beautiful experience, erotic, excellent. Eyes closed imagery and fantasy to music. No dark corners, benign and peaceful and lovely. There was a brief intestinal cramps early and a little diarrhea, but no other problems. I was able to sleep after 8 hours, but had guarded dreams. A beautiful +3. Some visuals, but not intrusive. Moderate, good-mannered kaleidoscopic imagery against dark. Music superb. Clear thinking, calmly cosmic. This is a seminal or archetypal psychoactive material. A very good experience and good for repeats. About 10 to 12 hours. Sleep difficult, but okay. You might have noticed there that Sasha used the term +3 to describe his effects with mescaline. This is something known as the Shulgin rating scale, which he uses extensively in both PiHKAl and TiHKAl to explain the effects of the drugs that he is experimenting with. And the scale goes like this. At the very bottom, you have a ± experience, which is a threshold experience with a compound, and if you take a higher dosage of the compound and that yields actual psychoactive effects, then you can say that the ± was valid. If you take a higher dosage and no new effects are felt, then that means the ± was a false positive. Next from there, you have a +1 experience, which is a very mild psychedelic experience where the chronology of the trip can be extracted with some effort and the effects of the compound aren't quite concrete at this point. Up further from there, you have the +2 experience where the effects of the drug are quite well known and understood and the chronology is quite obvious. However, the user of this particular compound at a +2 experience can, if they want, repress the experience and continue about their normal day-to-day activities, assuming they're experienced enough with psychedelics. After the +2 experience, you have the +3 experience, which is when you are fully immersed in the psychedelic experience. The chronology of the trip is very well defined and the effects cannot be ignored anymore. And after the +3 experience, you have the +4 experience, which I am just going to read to you what Sasha says about the +4 experience. A rare and precious transcendental state, which has been called a peak experience, a religious experience, divine transformation in a state of samadhi, and many other names throughout other cultures. It is not connected to the +1, +2, and +3 of the measuring of a drug's intensity. It is a state of bliss, a participation mystique, a connectedness with both the interior and exterior universes, which has come about after the ingestion of a psychedelic drug, but which is not necessarily repeatable with a subsequent ingestion of that same drug. If a drug or technique or process was ever to be discovered which would consistently produce a +4 experience in all human beings, it is conceivable that it would signal the ultimate evolution and perhaps the end of the human experiment. Now that's a lot for you to kind of take in and digest as we move on to the next compound of the magical half dozen called DOM, or dimethoxymethylamphetamine, not methamphetamine. This particular psychedelic was very widespread during the heyday of Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco and was originally distributed under the name STP, which coincidentally it was named after the motor oil brand for who knows what reason, but many people knew it as super terrific psychedelic, among many other phrases, and Sasha describes his experience with this psychedelic as such. The first 4 hours were largely directed to the body. There was a shuddering and a tight jaw, and I am not particularly motivated to talk to anyone. It is more arousing, like amphetamine, than depressing, like phenobarb. I'm feeling just a little sick at the 3-hour point, but a bit of regurgitation clears this up. Then, at the 4th hour, it went totally outside of me. I saw the clouds towards the west. The clouds! No visual experience has ever been like this. The meaning of color has just changed completely. There are pulsations, and pastels are extremely pastel, and now the oranges are coming into play. It is a beautiful experience. Of all past joys, LSD, mescaline, cannabis, peyote, this ranks number 1. Normally, I have no color effects with mescaline. A dynamic experience. Feels good, too. The first awareness was at 30 minutes and it was in the tummy. The development was extremely rapid, something more like LSD than previously remembered. The body tremor feels like poisoning. There's no escaping the feeling of being destabilized, but at least there's no nausea. The transition ended and the trauma cleared completely at about the 2nd hour. The music was exceptional. The erotic was exceptional. The fantasy was exceptional. Litz's A Christmas Cantina No. 1, Part 1, with eyes closed was an experience without precedent. There were some residual effects still noted the next day. This may be a bit much for me. Moving forward to our third compound of the 6, we have 2CB, otherwise known as bromo-dimethoxyphenethylamine, which is actually a mescaline synthetic and quite popular in Europe, or at least it used to be. At any rate, most people report quite pleasant and positive experiences with this compound. However, it's worth noting that some really don't like it and prefer the dissociative effects of ketamine. At least, that's what Sasha notes in the book. At any rate, here are Sasha's experiences with 2CB. The drug effect first became known to me as a shift of colors toward golden and rose tones. Pigments in the room became intensified. Shapes became rounder, more organic. A sensation of lightness and rivulets of warmth began seeping through my body. Bright lights began pulsing and flashing behind my closed lids. I began to perceive waves of energy flowing through all of us in unison. I saw all of us as a gridwork of electrical energy beings, nodes on a bright, pulsating network of light. Then the interior landscape shifted into broader scenes. Dialesque vistas were patterned with eyes of Horus. Brocades of geometric design began shifting and changing through radiant patterns of light. It was an artist's paradise, representing virtually the full pantheon of the history of art. I am totally into my body. I am aware of every muscle and nerve in my body. The night is extraordinary, moon full, unbelievably erotic, quiet, and exquisite, almost unbearable. I cannot begin to unravel the imagery that imposes itself during the finding of an orgasm, trying to understand physical, spiritual merging in nature. That got awfully sexual, didn't it? At any rate, we're moving on to the last 3 compounds on this list, which are all members of the 2CB family, these being 2CE, 2CT2, and 2CT7. And in the interest of brevity, I'm going to read to you only one of the entries that Sasha has given us for each of the compounds. And if you wish to read any further about any of these compounds or any compound that Sasha and Anne discovered themselves, you can do all of that at the link below. Also, if you have made it this deep into the video, I thank you so much, and I ask only that you press that subscribe button. At any rate, without further ado, let's talk about Sasha's experiences with 2CE, 2CT2, and 2CT7, respectively. The view out of the window was unreal. The garden was painted on the window, and every petal of flower and tuft of grass and leaf of tree was carefully sculptured in fine strokes of oil paint on the surface of the glass. It was not out there, it was right here in front of me. The woman who was watering the plants was completely frozen, immobilized by Vermeer, and when I looked again, she was in a different place, but again frozen. I was destined to become the eternal museum viewer. I chose 2CT2 at this dose level because of the lateness of getting started, and I wanted a shorter experience with my daughter and her family around. I feel, however, that I have somewhat less of a body load with 2CT7. Today, I was badly in need of the help that might possibly come from this material, and today it was my ally. I sorely needed the type of help that it afforded. The result was to work off the heavy feeling of tiredness and lack of motivation that had been hounding me. The next day, I felt that I had dropped my burden. A wonderful day of integration and work. Took about 2 hours for the onset, some nausea on and off that seemed to cycle periodically throughout the day. Visuals were great, much like mescaline but less sparkly. Lots of movement and aliveness, velvety appearance and increased depth perception. Neck and shoulder tension throughout the day along with legs. I would periodically notice extreme tightness of muscles and then relax. Working was very integrative. Back and forth constantly between wonderful God space, similar to MDMA but more grounded, then always back to sadness. I felt that it really showed me where I was unfinished, but with self-loving and tolerance. Tremendous processing and letting go, seeing things very clearly and also able to laugh at my trips. Lots of singing. In spite of shoulder tension, vocal freedom and facility were very high. I felt my voice integrated and dropped in a way it never had before, and that remained for several days. Able to merge body, voice, psyche, and emotions with music and then let go of it as a role. I also realized and gave myself permission to do whatever it takes to get free. I let go of Dad with Tragic Arias. The next day, I let go of Mom by singing Kaddish for her and merging with it. And I wanted to bring up a note that Sasha mentions in the book about 2CT2 and 2CT7 being that they are quite similar experiences, with most of their differences being physical. With 2CT2, there's a greater tendency towards physical disturbances such as nausea and diarrhea. However, the experience is much shorter. With 2CT7, the physical disturbances are much less, however, the trip in the experience lasts for nearly twice as long. That is all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.